Can you believe it? Becoming poor in the United States by 2025 is also gradually becoming a type of crime. In a country once proud to be the land of opportunity, not having a roof over your head, even if only due to job loss, rising living costs, or illness, is now turning you into a target for surveillance, fines, arrest, and even expulsion from your own community. The homelessness crisis in the United States has crossed the line from a social issue. It's no longer just tents popping up along the highway or long lines of people waiting for charitable meals. It has become a silent war between those desperately trying to survive and the new laws being enacted across America. Laws that are making the lives of the homeless even more desperate. From banning tenting and sleeping in vehicles to criminalizing sidewalk occupation or even just sitting too long in public areas, America is treating the homeless as troublemakers rather than victims of a system that is cracking at the seams. In today's video, we'll uncover the truth behind the new laws quietly destroying the lives of millions and why America is entering its worst homelessness crisis in decades. When mentioning homelessness, society often reflexively attributes it to vice, laziness, or personal failure. But that's just the thinnest slice of the issue. What's happening underneath is a much more complex socio-economic structure. The US currently records approximately 770,000 homeless people on any given night, the highest number in nearly 20 years. The number of people living outdoors alone increased by 39,000, or 20%, reflecting the growing inability of more and more people to access shelter. These numbers don't just speak to the poorest people, but also to those who are slipping out of the stable layer. When tracing back to the root cause, most studies point to the same factor: the affordable housing crisis. Many experts state directly, homelessness is a housing problem. There's a housing shortage, rents are rising faster than wages, and the housing market is so stratified that workers can't afford to stay. The emergence of the working homeless group, people who have jobs but cannot afford rent, is the clearest sign of this misalignment. At the personal finance level, only 45 to 60% of Americans can handle a $400 or $1,000 emergency, while the rest are forced to borrow or use credit cards, increasing the risk of a downward spiral. From the mid-2010s until after the pandemic, the cost of living increased at an accelerating rate that wages could not keep up with. Rent, healthcare, food, and basic services all increased simultaneously, while median income over the past 5 years only rose by about 20%. Conversely, many essential costs increased by 30–50%. That distance makes the lives of the working class feel like running on a reverse escalator. The harder they try, the more they stay in place. After the pandemic, the US economy is diverging in a K-shaped pattern. Those with assets saw profits soar, while those living on salaries faced debt and expenses exceeding their income. They fell into a familiar cycle, working overtime, taking on gigs, changing jobs, but still couldn't escape the monthly pressure. In such an environment, just a small shock, a rent increase, a medical bill, or a month of unemployment is enough to push them from housed but precarious to sleeping in their car. And when a home is lost, living in an RV car or cheap motel is also not a safe solution. These models are subject to their own legal risks: parking time, restricted areas, hygiene regulations, and public order laws. A minor violation could result in the vehicle being towed, meaning the loss of the last refuge. Homelessness today is no longer a personal outcome, but a logical consequence of a system where the cost of living is increasing faster than people's ability to adapt. Inflation and rent increases eat up wage increases for low-income groups, making all efforts insufficient to keep them in the system. At a deeper level, the role of institutions also begins to become clear. Many cities no longer treat homelessness as a social issue, but are gradually shifting toward the order management group, where parking laws, camping bans, or sidewalk regulations inadvertently turn economic vulnerability into a punishable offense. At that time, those who lost their homes not only lost their shelter, but also faced the risk of being considered violators simply for trying to survive within a legal framework that no longer had a place for the poor. Along the Pacific coast, from California to Washington, a paradox is growing year by year. The number of people living in cars and RVs is increasing faster than anywhere else in the United States. Home prices and rents on the West Coast have soared to the highest in the nation, forcing thousands to turn dilapidated RVs into their last resort for shelter. Instead of being seen as a temporary stopgap, RVs have become homes on wheels for a segment of the population that the housing market no longer accommodates. However, instead of expanding affordable housing or increasing shelter capacity, many cities on the West Coast are going in the opposite direction, shrinking the legal living space for those currently living in vehicles. These decrees might sound like they only belong to the urban transport sector, but when applied to the lives of the poor, they become invisible clamps. From prohibiting tenting and sleeping on sidewalks within a 100-foot radius of schools or parks, to limiting parking to 24 to 48 72-hour increments, or banning overnight RV parking in most residential areas. Many cities are even expanding the sensitive zones to the point where they almost cover the locations that the homeless used to choose as shelter. No document explicitly states homeless people are prohibited, but all regulations target the group living in vehicles, a group that cannot move continuously, cannot park long-term, and has no other options beside the remaining vacant land. The West Coast has inadvertently become a place where the intersection of high housing costs and a restrictive legal system creates a desperate trap. Among the cities, Los Angeles stands out as the area with the most aggressive impact. It's not because they have an overly harsh law, but because LA's entire legal ecosystem, combined with a high homeless population, makes the pressure on people living in vehicles more intense than anywhere else. LAMC 41.18, a law prohibiting sitting, lying, or sleeping on sidewalks within 500 to 1,000 feet of schools, libraries, and freeways, effectively turns most residential areas into no-go zones for people living in RVs. Looking at the map, the restricted areas overlap to the point where it's very difficult to find a legitimate stopping point. Along with that, cities are implementing license plate recognition camera systems and tow truck fleets that operate almost continuously. This makes life in an RV feel like living inside a ticking clock. Stay too long, park in the wrong spot, park near a sensitive area. And their entire assets, lifestyle, paperwork, and medications could disappear in just a few hours. It's no coincidence that many people describe this life as working full-time just to keep a legal parking spot. What's noteworthy is that this entire tightening cycle is happening against the backdrop of the highest housing prices in the country. In San Francisco, the median home price exceeds $1.3 million, 3 to 4 times more expensive than in many Midwest cities. In Los Angeles, the median rent is 50–70% higher than the US median, equivalent to $2,700 to $3,500 per month in many areas. When homes become a luxury item, RVs become the ultimate survival option. And as RVs become homes, cities are once again seeking ways to limit their presence to maintain urban order. Behind these tightening laws lies a series of overlapping pressures. Residents are concerned about hygiene and safety, businesses fear losing customers, and the government worries about its urban image. But beneath that lies a more unavoidable reality. Many cities like New York, San Diego, or Seattle lack the capacity to provide affordable housing, so they are forced to manage homelessness by restricting where the poor can stand. The West Coast thus became a laboratory for management models by reducing the presence of the poor instead of addressing the root causes. The law doesn't mention the word homeless, but the impact falls most heavily and strongly on the homeless. For them, living in an RV on the West Coast is like living in a room with no exit. Each move only further depletes them. while the only door leading them out of the crisis, affordable housing, becomes increasingly out of reach. In the Northwest and Mountain States regions, one doesn't see the massive tent cities like in California. But here lies another paradox. The laws are becoming increasingly strict, while the supporting infrastructure is insufficient for people to stay long. It's a land where cities try to maintain order with strict regulations, but lack the resources to ensure that the homeless can survive each winter. Portland is the clearest example of this model. The city passed the public camping ordinance, which prohibits camping on public land when the person has reasonable access to shelter. The old version of this law even allowed for fines or light prison sentences for those who refuse to enter a shelter with empty beds. However, the problem lies in the word reasonable. The number of shelter beds is always much lower than the number of people needing shelter. The law assumes that the homeless have a choice, while in reality, they have almost none. Denver has a similar but more severe story. The urban camping ban has been in place since 2012, prohibiting the erection of tents, tarps, or any form of shelter on public land. Despite thousands being placed in support programs and large camps being constantly cleared, the city's total homeless population still increased by nearly 8% to around 10,800 people. This is proof that clearing encampments doesn't reduce homelessness. It just makes people disappear from sight for a short time. In Tacoma, the logic of tightening the law continues to be pushed further. The city expanded the camping ban zone to a radius of 10 blocks around the shelter and 200 feet along waterways. These restrictions have almost completely eliminated the spots commonly used for camping. On the map, the no camping zone is so large that the homeless are pushed into the very situation the law never acknowledges. They are forced to break the rules because there is nowhere else they are allowed to stop. The commonality among cities in the Northwest and Mountain States region is a severe lack of shelter. Each time a tent camp is cleared, the homeless lose their documents, medication, and personal belongings, the bare minimum needed to apply for jobs, register for benefits, or maintain their health. Losing a blanket can be compensated for, but losing personal documents or chronic medication can completely derail their recovery journey. These policies stem from real pressures. Residents demand better security, businesses want clean spaces, and the city needs to manage camps that are growing faster than it can control. But the budget, affordable housing, and support resources haven't kept pace with what the law expects. The result is a conflict typical of this region. Strict laws to maintain order, but insufficient infrastructure to support the people. The Northwest and Mountain States thus became the clearest example of policy failure. When a city tightens regulations without the ability to expand shelter or housing, the homeless are not solved, they are merely pushed into increasingly smaller spaces where they find it both difficult to live and easy to be considered in violation. And when their existence depends on conditions the city cannot meet, policy, no matter how well-intentioned, becomes a dead end. The inland region, spanning cities like Phoenix, Las Vegas, and Salt Lake City, is where we see most clearly a different pattern from the West Coast. Less affordable housing, fewer social safety net resources, but the strictest enforcement of laws. This is a region where the role of the state becomes more pronounced, while the social safety net thins to the point where the vulnerable can fall straight to the bottom with just a small slip, with nothing to catch them. In Phoenix, the turning point came with a ruling from Maricopa County Court declaring the large encampment area, the zone, a public nuisance. The city was forced to clear the entire area and relocate hundreds of people living there. This was not just an act of coercion, but set a legal precedent for large-scale camp clearing operations later. If a tent camp was disruptive enough to businesses or residents nearby, it could be wiped out almost immediately. Following the Supreme Court's 2024 Grants Pass ruling, which allows cities to ban camping even without sufficient shelter beds, a wave of stricter laws has spread across the inland region. Cities no longer have to prove they have legal housing before issuing penalties. This opens a very wide door for enforcement, especially in areas that already lack supporting infrastructure. Las Vegas implemented a ban on sleeping or camping on sidewalks many years ago, with fines that can reach up to $1,000 or 6 months in jail. The latest revisions also remove the condition "must have no shelter available," meaning anyone sleeping outdoors in prohibited areas can be considered in violation, regardless of whether they have anywhere else to go. For the homeless, who already have no money, administrative penalties only push them deeper into a cycle of debt and legal issues. Salt Lake City again chose to increase intervention levels through the Encampment Impact Mitigation Program, cleaning, trash collection, clearing hot camps. But after grants pass, enforcement was noticeably increased. The police are expected to maintain order, while the city is unable to create enough additional shelter. The Utah Supreme Court even ruled that Salt Lake City did not violate nuisance laws despite the continued existence of many encampments, indicating that the region's debate is not about whether to enforce, but about how much to enforce. A new ban, a court decision, a camp cleanup campaign. Any of these could sever the fragile threads of life they are clinging to. And when the support system is as thin as glass, even a small impact is enough to shatter it, leaving people to fend for themselves amidst the very laws that were supposed to protect them. There's a kind of fear spreading across America, not noisy or chaotic, but creeping into every family conversation, every bill sent at the beginning of the month, every sleepless night of people who thought they were still stable. It's that fragile feeling when you realize that with just a small event, anyone can fall off their own roof. National financial surveys show that more than half of Americans, about 53%, are worried they can't afford an emergency expense, even if it's only a few $100s. Most say that if they experience an event, they are forced to use a credit card or borrow money. Another statistic shows that 67% of Americans feel behind on their savings goals, with many having to dip into their emergency funds to pay rent and regular bills. As the financial cushion thins, the resilience of an entire generation visibly weakens. Meanwhile, HUD data shows a 12% increase in homelessness in just 1 year, and the most recent estimate, around 770,000 people on a single night, indicates an increase of nearly 18%. This is no longer just a story about the most vulnerable groups. This is a sign that the risk of homelessness is approaching the middle class, those who once believed they were outside the danger zone. What's more concerning is the change in the legal environment around them. When RVs are restricted, camping is prohibited, and parking time is limited, people understand that if they lose their homes, even the option of temporarily living in their vehicles will no longer be feasible. RVs, once a lifeline, are now a legal burden. New ordinances mean that a person's last refuge can be towed away in just a few hours. That unease grew stronger as people compared America today with the memories of previous generations. There was a time when Americans believed that if they just worked hard, they would have a home, a job, and a stable life. But in the context of the cost of living rising faster than wages, that belief is no longer as certain as before. This fear becomes even more real when people witness tents springing up at the base of large office buildings, RVs filling industrial lots, or cars being towed away right in front of them. It made them realize that falling out of the system wasn't a distant possibility. It could happen to the neighbors, with friends, with family, or with themselves if an accident, a medical bill, or a job loss happens at the wrong time. And it is precisely the silence of this fear, a silence that everyone feels but few dare to speak, that has led America into a period of unprecedented instability for decades. From outside the borders of the United States, the story of homelessness is creating a widespread shock. International media consistently describes the tent cities sprawling across American and Canadian urban areas as the starkest paradox of the developed world. Above, a dazzling skyline of glass buildings symbolizing wealth and technology. Directly below, rows of tents stretch along the sidewalks, streets where human exhaustion is more evident than any statistic. When the US announced that homelessness had increased for 2 consecutive years, many major newspapers called it the worst crisis ever recorded in a wealthy nation. The fact that nearly 770,000 people became homeless in a single night is no longer just a statistic for a struggling nation. It raises questions for the entire world. How can a massive economy, with the world's leading total output, fail to keep its citizens from losing their homes? That astonishment only grew after the Supreme Court's Grants Pass ruling, which allows cities to criminalize outdoor sleeping even when there is insufficient shelter space. For many countries, this is a symbolic signal. America seems to be shifting from a welfare philosophy to a coercive one, from support to control, and they can't believe it's happening in a country that was once a model of individual freedom. Analyses from Europe and Canada point to a consistent factor. High levels of inequality and an overly thin welfare system have caused homelessness in the US to not only increase rapidly, but also in an uncontrollable manner. Countries with stronger social safety nets are looking at the situation in the US as a warning. If policies don't evolve at the same pace as the cost of living and economic fluctuations, even the wealthiest nation can see hundreds of thousands of people fall out of the safety net. But the global reaction wasn't just shock. It also carries a tone of regret. For many generations around the world, America was once a symbol of opportunity, a place where dreams didn't just exist in movies, but on the bustling streets of New York or Los Angeles. Now, as that image is obscured by rows of tents and outdoor sleeping bans, the world clearly sees the disconnect between the America of yesterday and the America of today. It is the contrast between wealth and social crisis that makes this story so widely appealing. It caused many countries to look inward and realize a truth that is not easy to accept. Prosperity is not immune to social collapse. If a country with a huge GDP and a world-leading technology sector still leaves nearly 1 million people homeless, then any society, rich or poor, could face a similar outcome if it loses its social safety net. From the outside world, America's homelessness crisis is not just an American problem. It's a serious lesson for every nation, that a system is only as strong as its ability to protect the weakest. And when those people began to fall in droves, it wasn't just the tragedy of a group. It was a wake-up call for the entire social structure. The homelessness crisis in America today is not just a humanitarian issue, nor is it solely a consequence of economics or policy. It is a mirror reflecting cracks that have long existed in the fabric of modern society. Housing costs exceeding wages, benefits failing to keep pace with the times, laws designed to manage order rather than protect people, and a generation that grew up with the American dream now witnessing it slipping out of reach. On the brightly lit streets with billboards, at the foot of skyscrapers, and alongside bustling roads every day, hundreds of thousands of people are still struggling to find a place to survive without breaking the law. Not all of them chose that life, and none of us can say for sure that we will never find ourselves in a similar situation. Homelessness, in a sense, is a barometer showing that America is changing in ways few desire. A place that once promised a future for anyone who worked hard now makes many fear that a single misstep could cost them everything. As the roads that once symbolized America's prosperity now become home to hundreds of thousands of people, are we seeing a warning sign or the inevitable consequence of a model that has reached its limits? If what is shared in this video resonates with you, please like and share the video so that more people have the opportunity to see this comprehensive picture. And if you want to continue exploring other profound human and social stories with us, subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. The content in the video is based on public data, official reports, and descriptive analyses of social phenomena. The video is not intended to criticize individuals, organizations, or the government. It has no purpose of inciting, accusing, or creating prejudice against any group of people. All information is compiled with objectivity, serving educational purposes, raising awareness, and facilitating community discussion.